The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted a session quite like this one. Representatives from every surviving species packed the great circular hall, their attention focused not on the traditional speaker's podium, but on a simple metal table where Admiral Stone sat, across from a collection of the galaxy's most brilliant military minds. The humans had arrived in their typical style, no ceremonial ships or diplomatic fanfare, just a converted cargo hauler that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts. Admiral Stone herself wore a simple, military uniform rather than the elaborate formal wear favored by galactic dignitaries. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," said Grand Admiral Kethfer of the Stellar Navy, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the human battle reports. "You defeated a fleet of 200 devourer entities using weapons that my tactical computer classifies as pre-industrial siege equipment. That's essentially accurate," Stone confirmed. "Though I'd argue that calling railguns pre-industrial is technically incorrect. The principles are old, but the engineering is quite sophisticated." Admiral Kethfer gestured dismissively with one of his 6 arms. "Admiral, my fleet possesses quantum torpedo systems capable of unraveling matter at the subatomic level. How can simple kinetic weapons possibly be superior?" Dr. Vasquez, who had accompanied the human delegation, leaned forward with the patient expression of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. "Admiral, let me ask you a question. When your quantum torpedoes strike an enemy ship, what happens to the energy they release?" "The quantum field disruption cascades through the target's molecular structure, causing it gets absorbed by the devourers," Dr. Vasquez interrupted. "Every joule of exotic energy you pump into them makes them stronger. Your sophisticated weapons are essentially feeding the enemy." She activated a portable display showing the human weapon systems. "Our kinetic weapons don't release energy in any meaningful sense. They simply transfer momentum. When a tungsten rod traveling at 98% of light speed hits a target, there's no exotic energy signature for the devourers to absorb, just Newton's laws of motion being very unfriendly to anything in the way." Technical advisor Morden S. Mandibles clicked nervously. "But surely there must be defensive applications for these primitive systems? Ways to adapt our existing military doctrine?" Admiral Stone shook her head. "Advisor, you're thinking about this backwards. You can't adapt our methods to your military doctrine because our methods specifically reject your military doctrine." She stood and walked to the display, pointing to images of human ships engaged in combat with the devourers. "Look at how your species approach warfare. You build ships with shields designed to deflect energy weapons. Your tactics assume long-range engagement with sophisticated targeting systems. Your entire strategic philosophy is based on technological superiority. The images changed to show human marines boarding devourer entities with nothing but mechanical weapons and chemical explosives. We build ships that can survive direct physical impact. Our tactics assume close-quarters combat where technology fails. Our strategic philosophy is based on the assumption that the enemy will always be better equipped than we are." Grand Admiral Kethfer's expression suggested he was developing a headache. "Admiral, what you're describing isn't military strategy, it's barely controlled chaos." "It's human strategy," Stone corrected. "And it's the only approach that's actually worked against the devourers." The debate continued for hours, with various alien military leaders proposing modifications to human tactics that would make them more civilized and efficient. Each suggestion was politely but firmly rejected by the human delegation. Finally, Counselor Thane of the Broken World stood to address the assembly. His scarred features carried the authority of someone who had witnessed the fall of 1,000 worlds. "Fellow representatives," Thane began, "I have watched our greatest fleets burn while trying to fight the devourers with sophisticated weapons and elegant tactics. I have seen reality-warping technologies that could reshape star systems fail to even slow these entities down." He gestured toward the human delegation. "These beings just accomplished something that every military force in the galaxy said was impossible." They didn't do it by being more advanced than the Devourers. They did it by being more primitive. The chamber fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. You want to know the truth? Thane continued. The truth is that we've spent so long believing that technological advancement equals military superiority, that we forgot the most fundamental principle of warfare. The enemy gets a vote. Ambassador Zexhias Crystalline form brightened as he addressed the assembly. The humans didn't try to out-sophisticate the Devourers. They brought weapons and tactics that the enemy simply hadn't encountered before. They fought a war that the Devourers couldn't adapt to because they fought it on terms the Devourers couldn't understand. Dr. Vasquez activated her display again, this time showing tactical analyses from the Sol System battle. The key insight isn't the specific weapons we used. It's the philosophy behind them. We assumed our enemy would be superior in every conventional measure, so we stopped fighting conventionally. But how do we implement such philosophy? Asked Admiral Kethver. Our entire industrial base is designed around energy-based weapon systems. Our crews are trained for sophisticated technological warfare. You don't implement it, Admiral Stone said bluntly. You throw it all away and start over. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Representatives who had spent centuries perfecting their military technologies couldn't conceive of abandoning them. Think about it logically, Stone continued once the noise subsided. Every weapon system you've developed makes the Devourers stronger. Every defensive measure you've deployed has been overcome. Every tactical doctrine you've employed has failed. She walked among the assembled delegates, her simple uniform a stark contrast to their elaborate ceremonial gear. You want to win this war? Stop trying to be better than the enemy and start trying to be different from them. General Santos, representing the human ground forces, stepped forward. My Marines have developed training protocols that can teach any species to fight effectively against the Devourers. But it requires abandoning everything you think you know about modern warfare. What exactly would this training involve? Asked Representative Krill. Santos's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Hand-to-hand combat with mechanical weapons. Tactical doctrine based on pre-industrial siege warfare. Combat engineering using chemical explosives and kinetic systems. You want to turn our soldiers into barbarians, Kethver said flatly. I want to turn your soldiers into survivors, Santos replied. Because right now, sophisticated military training is just teaching people how to die efficiently. The session broke for recess, giving the alien representatives time to consult with their governments. When they reconvened, the mood had shifted dramatically. High Counselor Vorth took the podium, his tentacles writhing with what the humans had learned to recognize as determination. The Council has reached a decision. We formally request that humanity establish training centers throughout the galaxy to teach our military forces these primitive combat techniques. Additionally, Vorth continued, we are authorizing the immediate halt of all advanced weapons production in favor of the kinetic and chemical systems, demonstrated by the human forces. Admiral Stone nodded slowly. We can do that. But understand, this isn't just about changing your weapons. This is about changing how you think about warfare itself. She activated a star chart showing the current extent of Devourer incursions. The enemy has consumed roughly 40% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. They're still advancing, and they're still adapting to every new weapon system they encounter. The chart zoomed in on human space, showing the recent battle site. But for the first time since this invasion began, they've encountered something they can't adapt to, an enemy that refuses to play by the rules they understand. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. We're going to teach you how to be unreasonable. How to solve problems with violence and stubbornness instead of elegance and efficiency. How to win fights by being too stupid to know you should lose. And if this approach fails? Asked Ambassador Zexhi, Admiral. Stone's smile was the same one her ancestors had worn while facing down. Saber-toothed tigers with nothing but sharpened sticks. Then at least the galaxy will know that someone tried fighting dirty. As the session concluded and the various species began making arrangements to receive human military advisors, Counselor Thane approached Admiral Stone privately. "Human Admiral," he said quietly, "there is something you should know. Our intelligence report suggests the Devourers have begun adapting their tactics. They're learning to counter kinetic weapons." Stone nodded unsurprised. "We expected that. The key isn't to stay ahead of their adaptation, it's to adapt faster than they can. And how do you propose to do that?" Stone's grin was absolutely predatory. "By remembering that humans have been in an arms race with the universe since we first learned to make fire. And we've gotten very good at cheating." 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. Training centers established by human military advisors had produced the strangest army in galactic history: sophisticated aliens learning to fight with crossbows, catapults, and chemical explosives. Fleet Admiral Stone stood in the command center of the new Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the largest joint military operation in galactic history. 300 ships from dozens of species hung in space near the Devourer stronghold at the galactic core, and every one of them had been retrofitted with primitive weapon systems that would have seemed absurd just a year ago. "Fleet status report," she called to her operations. "Officer, all ships report ready for assault?" "Admiral," Commander Torres replied. He'd been promoted after the Sol battle, one of dozens of humans now serving as advisors to alien military forces. "The Veltar contingent has completed loading their kinetic projectile systems. The Kaleri squadron reports their chemical weapons are armed and ready." Stone nodded, still amazed at how quickly the galaxy's military forces had adapted to human tactical doctrine. The learning curve had been steep. Several species had initially balked at abandoning their energy-based weapons entirely, but the early successes had convinced even the most skeptical observers. "Signal from the Altarian dreadnought." "Vengeance," reported Communications Officer Hayes. "Captain Morthic requests permission to demonstrate their new boarding protocols." "Granted," Stone replied. She was curious to see what the insectoid Altarians had done with human close combat tactics on the main screen. The massive alien vessel deployed what appeared to be gigantic crossbow bolts attached to steel cables. The bolts struck a practice target and immediately deployed mechanical grappling systems. Within minutes, Altarian warriors were crossing the void on zip lines, carrying nothing but chemical explosives and kinetic weapons. "Effective," observed Dr. Vasquez, who had remained with the fleet as chief tactical advisor. "Though I have to admit, watching 8-foot-tall insects conducting boarding actions with medieval siege equipment is surreal even by our standards." The assault fleet represented the culmination of 6 months of the most intensive military training program in galactic history. Human instructors had worked with alien psychologists to develop combat doctrines that could function across dozens of different species and planetary environments. "Admiral," Torres called out, "we're receiving reports from the advanced scouts. The Devourer stronghold it's massive. Intelligence estimates suggest there are over 10,000 entities concentrated in the core systems." Stone absorbed this information calmly. The numbers were sobering. Even with the expanded fleet, they were still outnumbered 30 to 1 by enemies that had consumed half the galaxy. "Any signs they've adapted to kinetic weapons?" she asked. "Unknown, ma'am. The scouts couldn't get close enough for detailed analysis. But the energy readings suggest they've been consuming entire star systems to build some kind of megastructure." Dr. Vasquez frowned at her tactical displays. "That's new behavior. Previous intelligence suggested they were nomadic entities. Building infrastructure implies long-term planning." Before Stone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The main display shifted to show massive distortions in spacetime near the galactic core. "Admiral," Torres called out urgently, "massive energy signatures detected." "Something's coming through from the core systems?" The tactical display updated to show the approaching threat, and Stone felt her blood freeze. It wasn't a fleet of individual Devour entities, it was a single massive construct the size of a small moon, composed of what appeared to be thousands of the creatures merged into a unified organism. "By the void," whispered Ambassador Zexhai from his position on the bridge. "They've combined into a singular entity." "All ships, battle stations," Stone ordered. "Prepare for immediate engagement." The Mega Devourer moved through space with terrifying purpose, its approach disrupting the very fabric of reality around it. Energy readings showed power levels equivalent to a stellar mass black hole, and its gravitational field was strong enough to affect the motion of nearby planets. "It's learned," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. "It's adapted to kinetic weapons by creating a structure too large and too massive for projectile weapons to significantly damage." Stone watched the approaching entity and felt the familiar tingle at the base of her skull. This was at the moment when all their primitive tactics and barbaric strategies would either save the galaxy or prove inadequate against an enemy that had literally evolved beyond their ability to fight. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Implement contingency protocol Omega." Torres looked up from his station with surprise. "Admiral, that protocol is theoretical. We've never tested it under combat conditions." "Then today we find out if it works," Stone replied grimly, across the joint fleet. Ships began implementing the most insane tactical plan in military history. Instead of engaging the Mega Devourer directly, they began accelerating toward it at maximum velocity, not to attack, but to allow themselves to be consumed. "All ships confirm they understand the protocol," Torres reported, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "They're requesting final confirmation of orders." Stone looked around her bridge at the officers who had followed her through the first successful battle against the Devourers. "Are the special packages loaded and ready?" "All ships report internal charges are armed," confirmed Chief Nguyen from Engineering. "Detonation will occur automatically upon structural breach." Stone opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone. 6 months ago, we proved that primitive weapons could defeat advanced enemies. Today, we're going to prove that sometimes the most primitive tactic of all-ramming speed is the most effective." The plan was elegantly simple and completely insane. Each ship in the fleet had been loaded with what Dr. Vasquez called kinetic surprise packages, massive internal charges designed to detonate when the ships were consumed by the Mega Devourer. The explosions wouldn't be energy-based weapons that could be absorbed, but simple chemical and nuclear reactions designed to cause maximum structural damage from within. "It's a suicide run," Ambassador Zexhai observed. "It's a calculated sacrifice," Stone corrected. "The Devourers expect us to fight them from the outside. They've never encountered enemies willing to be consumed in order to attack from within." The fleet accelerated toward the Mega Devourer like moths toward a flame. One by one, ships disappeared into the massive entity's consuming darkness. From the outside, it appeared that the joint galactic fleet was being systematically destroyed. Then the explosions began deep within the Mega Devourer's structure. Hundreds of chemical and nuclear charges detonated simultaneously. The entity had absorbed the ships and their crews, but it couldn't absorb the kinetic force of internal explosions. Designed to cause maximum structural damage, the Mega Devourer convulsed, its massive form writhing as internal detonations tore it apart from within. Chunks of the creature the size of asteroids were blown free, creating gaps in its structure that revealed the consumed matter of entire star systems. "It's working," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "The internal damage is cascade failing throughout its structure, but the victory came at a horrific cost. 3/4 of the joint fleet had been sacrificed to deliver the killing blow. Hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members from dozens of species had died to prove that even the most evolved enemy could be defeated by beings willing to think like barbarians." "Admiral," Torres called out, "the Mega Devourer is breaking apart. Energy readings are dropping rapidly. I think we killed it." As the massive entity dissolved into constituent particles, something unprecedented happened. Instead of simply dispersing, the consumed matter began to reconstitute itself. Star systems that had been devoured months ago reformed in real time, complete with planets and orbital structures. The matter wasn't destroyed, Dr. Vasquez realized. It was being stored within the entity's structure. When we killed it, everything it had consumed was released. Across the galaxy, dead systems came back to life. Worlds that had been consumed by the devourers reformed with their populations intact, preserved within the entity's vast structure. Entire civilizations that had been thought extinct suddenly reappeared, confused but alive. Fleet Admiral Stone, came a transmission from High Counselor Vorth. Preliminary reports suggest that destroying the mega-entity has caused a chain reaction. Devourer entities throughout the galaxy are beginning to collapse. Whatever you did, it's working on a galactic scale. Stone slumped in her command chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the past year's battles. They had done it, a collection of primitive weapons and barbaric tactics had saved the galaxy from an enemy that the most advanced civilizations couldn't defeat. Ambassador Zexhai approached her station. His crystalline form bright with something she'd learned to recognize as profound respect. My people will want to know how you knew this tactic would work. Stone looked out at the space where the Mega Devourer had been, where chunks of matter were still reforming into the star systems they had once been. Ambassador, I didn't know it would work. But I knew that if we were going to lose, we were going to lose on our terms. And now? The edge of the Sol system had never hosted a fleet like this one. 37 ships hung in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit. And to any observer familiar with galactic naval standards, they would have appeared to be a collection of industrial equipment rather than warships. Fleet Admiral Rebecca Stone stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, watching the tactical display that showed the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy vessels appeared as dark gaps in space, not ships in any conventional sense, but holes in reality that consumed everything they touched. Enemy fleet composition? She asked her intelligence officer, Commander Park. Approximately 200 entities, ma'am, Park reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. Based on alien intelligence reports, each Devourer vessel is roughly equivalent to a galactic dreadnought in terms of destructive capability. Admiral Stone nodded calmly. The math was simple and terrifying. Humanity's entire fleet was outnumbered 6-1 by enemies that had already destroyed the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. And our own fleet status? All ships report ready for combat, Admiral. Kinetic weapons are charged and locked. Chemical systems are armed. All crews are at battle stations. Stone looked around her bridge, taking in the faces of her officers. Unlike the gleaming, sterile control centers she'd seen on alien ships, the Defiance's bridge looked like it belonged on a submarine from Earth's industrial age. Steel bulkheads, mechanical controls, and displays that used actual glass. Screens instead of holographic projections. Everything on the ship was designed with one principle in mind: keep working even when everything else failed. Signal from the alien observation vessel, reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Hayes. Ambassador, Zexhai requests permission to speak with you. Admiral, put him through. The ambassador's crystalline form appeared on the main screen. Though Stone noted he was transmitting from a ship positioned well behind the human fleet. Wise of him. Admiral Stone, Zexhai began, his voice carrying a note of desperation. I must urge you to reconsider this course of action. The Devourers have consumed fleets 10 times your size. Perhaps a strategic withdrawal. Ambassador, Stone interrupted gently. With respect, strategic withdrawal is what got the galaxy into this mess. Every time someone retreated, the Devourers got stronger. Every time someone tried to negotiate or find a peaceful solution, more worlds died. But your fleet is so small, your weapons so primitive. Our weapons are honest, Stone corrected. They do exactly what they're supposed to do, nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes, Ambassador, honest solutions work better than clever ones. The transmission ended, leaving Stone alone with her thoughts for a moment. She thought about the reports from the Outer Rim, the worlds that had fallen while their defenders tried to find sophisticated solutions to an impossible problem. She thought about her daughter, currently serving as an engineer on Mars, and her grandson, who was learning to walk in the Earth colonies. Most of all, she thought about the principle that had guided human expansion into space. When faced with something trying to kill you, kill it first. "Admiral," Commander Park called out, "enemy fleet has entered weapons range. They're beginning to accelerate toward our position." Stone watched the tactical display as the Devourer entities moved through space like living shadows. According to alien intelligence reports, they would begin by probing the human fleet with energy-draining attacks, attempting to overwhelm their shields and weapon systems before closing for the kill. "All ships," Stone announced over the fleet communication channel. "This is Admiral Stone. Today we face an enemy that has never encountered anything like us. They expect energy shields, quantum weapons, and sophisticated defense systems. They're going to get tungsten rods, chemical explosives, and 5,000 years of human stubbornness." Across the fleet, 37 crews prepared for a battle unlike any in galactic history. "They're expecting us to act like a civilized fleet," Stone continued. "They're expecting us to follow the standard tactical doctrines, to engage them according to established protocols. But we're not a civilized fleet, are we?" The responding cheer from 37 ships was loud enough to register on the communication sensors. "We're humans," Stone concluded, "and humans have never been famous for following the rules." The first Devourer attack came as expected tendrils of dark energy that reached out across space to drain power from the human ships. The tendrils struck the fleet and did absolutely nothing. "No effect on our systems, Admiral," reported Engineering Chief Nguyen. "Their energy-draining attacks are designed to work on exotic power sources. Our chemical and mechanical systems aren't even registering the attack." Stone smiled grimly. "All ships, commence firing. Show them what primitive looks like." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that would have been familiar to their ancestors. No particle beams or quantum disruptors, just kinetic projectiles, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed through purely electromagnetic means. The first volley struck the Devourer fleet like an invisible tsunami. Tungsten rods moving at 98% of light speed punched through the alien entities with devastating effect. The creatures, for lack of a better term, that had absorbed the energy of quantum weapons and reality warping devices were completely unprepared for simple kinetic force. Multiple enemy casualties, Park reported with barely contained excitement. "The lead elements of their fleet they're just gone, Admiral." But the Devourers were quick to adapt. The surviving entities began to spread out, moving in patterns designed to minimize the impact of projectile weapons. They launched counterattacks, using gravitational distortions and spatial compressions, weapons that could crush conventional starships like tin cans. The human ships rode out the gravitational attacks with the same stoic endurance that had carried their species through ice ages and asteroid impacts. Their mechanical systems groaned and flexed but held together, while their crews rode out acceleration forces that would have killed most alien species. "Damage report," Stone called out as the ship shuddered under another gravitational assault. "Minor structural stress. No critical systems affected," Nguyen reported. "These ships were built to handle the worst space could throw at us. A little artificial gravity isn't going to stop us." The battle developed into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Instead of the elegant long-range energy exchanges that characterized most space combat, it became a brutal close-quarters brawl. The Devourers, finding their energy-based attacks ineffective, closed to physical contact range. The humans, having expected this, welcomed them with open arms. "Deploy boarding parties," Stone ordered. And across the fleet, human marines launched themselves at enemy vessels in what could only be described as the galaxy's first interstellar boarding action. The marines attacked the Devourer entities with weapons that predated spaceflight, chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, and close combat weapons that worked through simple mechanical principles. They fought creatures that could absorb plasma weapons and quantum bombs using brass knuckles, combat knives, and shotguns loaded with depleted uranium slugs. It was barbaric. It was primitive. It was absolutely terrifying, and it worked. "Admiral," Park called out, his voice mixing disbelief with fierce pride. "Marines from the Retribution have successfully boarded and destroyed 3 enemy entities. They're reporting that the Devourers have no defense against direct physical assault." Stone watched the tactical display as her primitive fleet systematically dismantled enemies that had defeated the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The Devourers, creatures of pure energy and exotic matter, had never encountered opponents who solved problems by hitting them with very large hammers. "Signal all ships," Stone ordered. "Continue the assault. Press them hard and give them no time to adapt." The battle raged for 6 hours, and when it was over, the space around Sol system was filled with the debris of 200 Devourer entities. The human fleet had lost 4 ships and taken heavy damage to a dozen others. But they had achieved something unprecedented. They had stopped the unstoppable. "Admiral," Communications Officer Hayes reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Word of our victory is spreading through every surviving system." Stone nodded tiredly. "What are they saying?" "Most of them don't believe it, ma'am. But the alien observation ship confirmed our combat logs. The galaxy knows that someone finally fought the Devourers and won." As the fleet began recovery operations, Ambassador Zexhia's transmission came through again. This time, his crystalline form was bright with something that might have been hope. "Admiral Stone," he began, "I must apologize for doubting your methods. The Galactic Council is convening an emergency session. They want to know, can you teach the rest of the galaxy to fight like humans?" Stone looked out at her battered fleet, at the crews who had just proven that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and smiled. "Ambassador, we'd be happy to give everyone a crash course in applied stubbornness." The shipyards above Mars had never seen anything like the construction frenzy now taking place. What had once been an orderly industrial complex had transformed into something resembling organized chaos. As humanity threw every resource at building the most primitive space fleet in galactic history, Commander Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of what would have been called a battleship in any other context, though flying weapons platform might have been more accurate. The ship had no name, yet there hadn't been time for proper naming ceremonies, but the crew had taken to calling it Momentum, which seemed appropriate for something designed to throw very heavy objects very fast. "Engineering report," Harrison called out to his chief engineer. "Commander Sarah Walsh." "All systems showing green, sir," Walsh replied, though her definition of systems would have confused most galactic naval officers. "Main railgun batteries are charged and ready. Chemical rocket pods are loaded and armed. The kinetic missile tubes are functioning within acceptable parameters." Harrison nodded, trying not to think too hard about those acceptable parameters. By human standards, the ship was a masterwork of engineering. By galactic standards, it was a flying museum piece held together with determination and prayer. The Momentum was built around a central spine that housed the largest railgun ever constructed by human hands. The weapon could accelerate a 10-ton tungsten penetrator to 98% of light speed, delivering roughly the same energy as a medium-sized asteroid impact. Supporting this main weapon were dozens of smaller railguns, chemical missile launchers, and what the crew had started calling the Angry Bees, swarms of simple, kinetic drones that attacked targets through sheer momentum. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the tactical station, "we're receiving final approach vectors from Fleet Command. The alien liaison ships are requesting permission to observe our weapons testing." Harrison glanced at the diplomatic section of his bridge, where Ambassador Zexhai and Technical Advisor Morden waited with barely concealed anxiety. Over the past 2 weeks, the alien observers had watched humanity's military construction with the same expression a parent might wear while watching their child play with dynamite. Permission granted, Harrison decided, but keep them at minimum safe distance. We're not entirely sure what minimum safe distance means for these weapons. The test targets were positioned in empty space beyond Pluto's orbita, collection of decommissioned ships and specially constructed barriers designed to simulate devour vessels based on intelligence. Reports from the Outer Rim. The alien observers had provided detailed specifications, though they'd warned that the devourers adapted quickly to new threats. All stations report ready, announced Torres. Firing solution computed for target Alpha. Harrison took a breath. 2 weeks ago, he'd been commanding a routine patrol vessel monitoring shipping lanes. Now he was about to fire the most powerful kinetic weapon ever built by human hands. Fire main battery. The momentum shuddered as the railgun discharged. There was no visible beam, no dramatic energy flash, just a slight vibration through the hull as 10 tons of tungsten accelerated to nearly light speed in the space of a few milliseconds. The target, a mock-up of a devourer vessel built to alien specifications, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was an expanding cloud of vapor and debris. Target eliminated, Torres reported with professional calm. Time from firing to impact, 0.3 seconds. Kinetic energy delivered, approximately 400 megatons TNT equivalent. Ambassador Zexhia's crystalline form was flickering with what Harrison had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. Commander, your weapon just delivered more destructive force than most species' planetary siege systems. And it's just a chunk of metal moving really fast, Harrison replied. No exotic energy signatures, no quantum effects, nothing for the devourers to absorb or adapt to. The testing continued for 3 hours. Chemical missiles obliterated smaller targets with thermonuclear warheads. Kinetic drones swarmed and destroyed everything in their path through sheer momentum. Even the ship's defensive systems mechanical. Point defense guns firing depleted uranium. Slugs proved devastatingly effective against simulated enemy projectiles, but it was the final test that truly impressed the alien observers. Harrison had ordered the deployment of what Dr. Vasquez had codenamed Project Trebuchet, a massive mechanical catapult built into an asteroid and designed to launch building-sized projectiles across interstellar distances. The target was a decommissioned space station positioned at the edge of the test range. The projectile was especially constructed. Penetrator rod made of osmium, the densest stable element humanity could easily obtain wrapped in a shell of conventional explosives. Trebuchet reports ready, Torres announced. Mechanical systems charged and locked. Fire! The asteroid-mounted catapult released its payload with purely mechanical force. No energy signature, no exotic propulsion, just torsion springs and mechanical leverage launching a 5-ton projectile at significant fractions of light speed. When the projectile hit the target station, the explosion was visible from 3 million kilometers away. The station and everything in a 50-kilometer radius around it simply vanished, consumed in a fireball that briefly outshone the distant sun. By the void, whispered technical advisor Morden. You've weaponized siege engines. We've weaponized everything, Harrison corrected cheerfully. Wait until you see what the Marines have been building. The Marine demonstration took place on a captured asteroid, where Colonel Maria Santos had constructed what she called an educational experience in applied infantry tactics. The alien observers were given protective suits and positioned at what the Marines assured them was a safe distance. Gentlemen, Colonel Santos began, addressing the alien delegation. For the past 10,000 years, galactic warfare has been dominated by energy weapons, shields, and sophisticated technological systems. Today, you're going to see what happens when Marines get creative with pre-industrial technology. The demonstration began with what Santos called enhanced crossbow technology, mechanical weapons that fired tungsten bolts at hypersonic velocities. The bolts punched through armor plates designed to stop plasma weapons as if they were paper. The beauty of mechanical systems, Santos explained as her Marines demolished target after target, is that they don't show up on energy sensors. They can't be disrupted by electromagnetic pulses, and they work just as well in hard vacuum as they do in atmosphere. Next came the explosives demonstration. Instead of sophisticated quantum charges or antimatter devices, the Marines used enhanced versions of humanity's oldest destructive tools, chemical explosives, thermite, and what Santos described as industrial-strength fireworks. The Devourers absorb energy. Santos continued as her demo team reduced a small building to rubble using nothing but carefully placed chemical charges. But they can't absorb kinetic force. Chemical reactions or good old-fashioned structural collapse. The final demonstration was what Santos called applied problem solving. The Marines had been given a scenario assault, a fortified position defended by enemies immune to energy weapons. Their solution would have horrified any civilized military officer and impressed any barbarian warlord. They used catapults to launch smoke canisters that obscured visual sensors. They employed mechanical battering rams to breach walls that could deflect plasma bolts. They attacked with crossbows, chemical explosives, and what appeared to be an actual medieval siege tower modified with rocket engines. "You're approaching warfare like it's still the pre-industrial age," Morden observed, his voice mixing horror and admiration. "We're approaching warfare like it's a problem to be solved," Santos corrected. "And sometimes the old solutions work better than the new ones." When the demonstrations concluded, the alien observers huddled together in what Harrison recognized as an emergency consultation. Their discussion lasted nearly an hour before Ambassador Zexhai approached him. "Commander," the alien began carefully, "my colleagues and I have reviewed your tactical demonstrations. We have reached a consensus." Harrison waited, unsure whether he was about to receive congratulations or condemnation. "You humans are absolutely terrifying," Zexhai continued. "Your weapons are primitive, your tactics are brutal, and your entire approach to warfare violates every principle of civilized conflict. I sense a but coming." "But," Zexhai's crystalline form brightened considerably, "for the first time since this crisis began, I believe we might actually have a chance." As the alien observers transmitted their reports back to the Galactic Council, Harrison looked out at the construction yards where dozens more ships like Momentum were taking shape. In 2 weeks, humanity had built a fleet that would have been considered laughably primitive by galactic standards. It was also the first fleet in galactic history specifically designed to fight enemies that fed on sophisticated technology. "Sir," Torres called from his station, "we're receiving priority communications from Earth Command. The Devourer fleet has been detected at the Proxima Relay Station. They'll be in scanning range of Sol System within 48 hours. Harrison felt that familiar tingle at the base of his skull, the voice of ancestors who'd survived by being ready for a fight. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All shh." The converted asteroid mining facility on Ceres had never been busier. What had once been a simple or processing plant was now humanity's most important military research center, and the modifications being made would have horrified any sensible engineer. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the main laboratory, watching her team perform what could charitably be called applied insanity. Around her, the brightest minds in human engineering were deliberately trying to build the most primitive weapons possible, and the results were both terrifying and oddly beautiful. "Status report," she called out to her team leaders. "Kinetic division reporting ready," announced Dr. Kim from across the lab. His team had been working on what they euphemistically called enhanced projectile systems, which really meant taking chunks of dense metal and finding increasingly creative ways to throw them very fast at targets. "The railgun prototypes are exceeding expectations," Kim continued. "We've managed to accelerate a tungsten rod to 0.95% of light speed using purely electromagnetic principles. No exotic energy sources, no quantum field manipulation, Just good old-fashioned Newtonian physics taken to its logical extreme. Dr. Vasquez nodded approvingly. The alien observers standing nearby Zex-Hi and a new arrival called Technical Advisor. Morden looked bewildered by the enthusiasm in Kim's voice. But Dr. Kim, Morden interjected, his beetle-like form, clicking nervously, surely such primitive systems cannot compete with quantum disruptors or reality-warping weaponry? Kim's grin was absolutely predatory. Advisor, do you know what happens when a kilogram of tungsten, moving at 95% of light speed, hits a target? Morden's antenna twitched as he performed rapid calculations. The kinetic energy would be approximately equivalent to. Oh, exactly, Kim said cheerfully. About 250 megatons of TNT equivalent. And the beautiful part? It's just a chunk of metal moving really fast. No energy signatures for the devourers to absorb, no exotic matter to adapt to, just Newton's laws of motion being very unfriendly to anything in the way. Dr. Vasquez moved to the next station, where the Chemical Weapons Division was working on their own special brand of madness. Dr. Okafor looked up from a device that resembled a massive shotgun crossed with a rocket launcher. Nuclear division ready for testing, Okafor reported. We've gone back to the fundamentals, fusion and fission weapons with chemical propulsion systems. No antimatter, no quantum tunnel bombs, just splitting atoms the way nature intended. The yield estimates? Vasquez asked. We've managed to pack a 50 megaton thermonuclear device into a shell that can be fired from a chemical cannon, Okafor said proudly. The delivery system is literally gunpowder and steel. The aliens' databases don't even classify it as a weapon. Their computers think it's a mining tool. Zex-Hi's crystalline form seemed to vibrate with distress. Dr. Vasquez, I must protest. These weapons are horrifically inefficient. A single quantum disruptor could deliver far more destructive potential with a fraction of the mass and energy. And that's exactly why they don't work on the Devourers, Vasquez replied patiently. Your quantum disruptors are sophisticated, elegant, and efficient. They're also exactly the kind of high-energy signatures that feed our enemy. She led the group to the most heavily secured section of the laboratory, where her personal project was taking shape. The device in the center of the room looked like something from humanity's industrial pastall, steel and chemical pellets and mechanical systems. This, she announced, is Project Slingshot. The alien stared at what appeared to be an enormous crossbow mounted on a spacecraft hull. You've built a siege weapon, Morden said slowly. For space combat, not just any siege weapon, Vasquez corrected. This is a torsion catapult capable of accelerating a 1-ton projectile to significant fractions of light speed using nothing but steel cables, mechanical leverage, and chemical propellants. No energy signature above background levels, no exotic matter, no quantum effects. But that's impossible, Zex-Hi protested. The engineering tolerances alone would require materials. Science that hasn't been seen in the galaxy for 10,000 years, Vasquez finished. See, when your technology advanced beyond the need for primitive engineering, you lost something important. You forgot how to build things that work under impossible conditions. She activated a holographic display showing the weapon specifications. Every component in this system is designed to operate in hard vacuum, under extreme acceleration with zero maintenance for extended periods. The targeting system is mechanical gears and levers and optical sights. The ammunition is lumps of the densest material we can manufacture. And the whole thing is built to survive direct hits from energy weapons because it's mostly empty space and structural steel. Dr. Kim joined the group, carrying a tablet with test results. Elena, the first prototype tests are complete. The good news is that it works better than projected. And the bad news? We accidentally punched a hole through 3 asteroids and nearly hit a commercial shipping lane. The projectile was still going 40% of light speed when it left the test range. Vasquez winced. We'll need to work on the containment protocols. Counselor Thane, who had been quietly observing the entire demonstration, finally spoke up. This is what I tried to tell the Council. You humans don't think like civilized beings. You think like predators? Is that supposed to be an insult? Doctor Okafor asked mildly. On the contrary, Thane's scarred features twisted into what might have been a smile. It's the highest compliment I can give, because right now the galaxy needs predators. The testing phase had been scheduled to last 2 weeks. It ended after 3 days when long-range scouts reported that the Devourer fleet had accelerated its advance. Entire sectors that should have held for months were falling in days. They're learning, Admiral Morrison announced during the emergency briefing. Every defensive strategy the Outer Worlds employ just makes them more efficient. At current rates, they'll reach the core systems within 60 standard days. The assembled team of humans and aliens absorbed this news with varying degrees of composure. The aliens looked defeated, their crystalline forms dim, their cybernetic parts humming with distress, their organic features drooping with despair. The humans looked angry. 60 days? Captain Chun asked, her voice deceptively calm. That's the optimistic projection, Morrison confirmed. Chun exchanged glances with Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Kim, and the other team leaders. How long to build and deploy a full weapons package? For a proper testing phase and incremental rollout? Vasquez began. For a throw everything at the wall and pray deployment? Chun interrupted. Vasquez grinned. Give me every industrial facility in the solar system in 2 weeks. We'll build you an arsenal that would make our ancestors proud. The untested prototypes could malfunction catastrophically, Morden warned. You could lose entire fleets. We could, Dr. Kim agreed, or we could win. And advisor, those are better odds than anyone else has managed so far? Zekhia's form brightened slightly. You're actually going to do this. Build an entire military force using primitive technology, and deploy it against an enemy that has defeated the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. That's the plan, Chun confirmed. You're all completely insane. Probably, Chun admitted. But here's the thing about being insane sometimes. It's the only sane response to an insane situation. As the meeting broke up and the frantic preparations began, Counselor Thane approached Dr. Vasquez privately. Human doctor, I must ask, do you truly believe this primitive approach will work? Vasquez looked out the observation window at the swarm of construction ships already beginning their work. Advisor, let me tell you something about humans. We're the species that looked at a vast, hostile universe full of things trying to kill us and decided to punch it in the face until it behaved. We've never met a problem we couldn't solve with sufficient application of violence, stubbornness, and complete refusal to accept defeat. And if you're wrong, then we'll go down swinging and the universe will know that someone fought back. Captain Sarah Chun was having what she considered a perfectly normal Tuesday morning when the impossible happened. She was reviewing supply manifests for the Mars freight run when her communications officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, suddenly went very pale. Captain, Rodriguez said, his voice cracking slightly, I'm receiving a transmission on the emergency diplomatic channel. It's from the Galactic Council. Sarah set down her coffee and stared at him. In the 200 years since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, contact with alien civilizations had been limited to a few trade agreements and one very awkward incident involving the Zorathi Empire trying to claim Earth as a protectorate. The Galactic Council had never acknowledged humanity's existence, much less contacted them directly. Are you certain it's legitimate? She asked. Rodriguez nodded, sweat beading on his forehead despite the ship's environmental controls. I've run it through every verification protocol we have. The encryption signatures match everything in our Xenodiplomacy database. Captain, they're requesting immediate transit to Earth for an emergency session with our government. Sarah felt that familiar tingle at the base of her skull, the same feeling she'd had right before the plasma storm on Europa, or when the pirates had tried to ambush them near the Titan shipping lanes. Her grandmother had called it the voice of ancestors who died because they didn't listen to their instincts. Patch me through to Admiral Morrison immediately, she ordered, and prep a quantum burst message to Earth Command. Something's wrong. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in the most surreal situation of her career. Her modest cargo hauler, the Defiant, was serving as escort to a massive alien diplomatic vessel that looked like someone had crossed a cathedral with a crystalline flower. The ship was beautiful in an utterly alien way. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking at something built by beings who had never known real danger. The alien ship's hull was too smooth, too perfect. There were no reinforced sections, no additional armor plating, no weapon hardpoints that could be quickly modified for different threats. It looked like it had been designed by artists rather than engineers. "Captain," her tactical officer, Sergeant Major Park, reported from his station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from that ship. The power output is off the charts, easily 1,000 times what we can generate. But the defensive systems—" He paused, shaking his head. "Ma'am, I don't think they have any." Sarah nodded grimly. "They've never needed them." When they reached Earth, the alien delegation was whisked away to emergency sessions that Sarah wasn't cleared to attend. But she didn't need to be in the room to know something catastrophic was happening. The orbital defense platforms had gone to maximum alert. Emergency broadcasts were being transmitted to every human colony, and the shipyards around Mars had suddenly shifted to round-the-clock production. It wasn't until 3 days later that Admiral Morrison finally briefed her and her crew. The Admiral looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week, and his usual composed demeanor had cracked around the edges. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, "I'm going to tell you something that will probably keep you awake for the rest of your lives. The galaxy is under attack by something called the Devourers. We don't know where they came from, we don't know what they want, and we don't know how to stop them." He activated a holographic display that showed vast swaths of space where stars had simply vanished. "They consume everything, matter, energy, even space-time itself. Entire solar systems are being erased from existence. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy have thrown everything they have at these things, and it's not working." Lieutenant Rodriguez raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, what does this have to do with us? We're barely a blip compared to species that can manipulate reality." Morrison's smile was sharp and utterly without humor. "That's exactly why they came to us, son. Turns out that being a blip might be humanity's greatest advantage." The briefing continued for 2 hours, covering enemy capabilities, failed countermeasures, and the complete collapse of galactic civilization's outer defenses. By the end, Sarah's crew looked shell-shocked, but Sarah herself felt something different. As Morrison described the Devourers' seemingly unstoppable advance, the way they absorbed energy attacks and adapted to new threats, she found herself thinking about her grandfather's stories from the old days on Mars. "Admiral," she said when the briefing concluded, "these Devourers, they feed on energy, right? Advanced technology makes them stronger?" "That's correct, Captain. Every weapon system the galaxy has developed seems to provide them with more power." Sarah nodded slowly. "And they're expecting the same kind of response from us? Ships that rely on exotic energy sources, weapons that manipulate fundamental forces?" "I imagine so. Why?" Sarah's smile was the kind that had made pirates reconsider their career choices. "Because, sir, humans have a long and distinguished tradition of disappointing expectations." That evening, Sarah found herself in an unprecedented position, sitting across from actual aliens in what had once been the United Nations building. The delegation consisted of 3 beings so different from humans that her brain kept insisting she was looking at elaborate special effects. Ambassador Zexai looked like a living crystal formation, his body refracting the room's lights into rainbow patterns. Counselor Thane appeared to be some kind of heavily scarred reptilian, while Representative Krill resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a mechanical spider. "Captain Chun," Ambassador Zexai began, his voice emerging from somewhere within his crystalline structure, "we must be frank with you. We are not here because we believe in humanity's potential. We are here because we are desperate." "I appreciate the honesty," Sarah replied. "Now let me return the favor. You came to the wrong species if you're looking for a miracle weapon or some revolutionary technology. We're still using chemical rockets for half our fleet." Thane leaned forward, his scarred features intent. But you're also the only species that has consistently survived contact with other sapient races while being technologically inferior. Sarah thought about that for a moment. It was true humanity had faced down the Zorathi Empire's attempt at subjugation, had held their own against merchant guild economic manipulation, and had earned grudging respect from species that should have been able to crush them effortlessly. "We cheat," she said simply. The aliens exchanged what might have been glances. "Elaborate," Krill clicked. "When the Zorathi tried to establish their protection over our system, everyone told us we should be grateful. Advanced civilization, superior technology, why would we resist?" Sarah's expression hardened. "So we built ships that weren't ships, they were bombs with life support. We attached engines to asteroids and loaded them with nuclear warheads. We told the Zorathi that if they wanted our system, they'd have to take it from a radioactive graveyard." "That's completely irrational," Zexhai observed. "That's completely human," Sarah corrected. "We don't fight fair, we don't follow rules we didn't agree to, and we absolutely refuse to accept that anything is impossible." Thane's scarred face broke into what might have been a smile. "Show me what you're thinking, human." Sarah activated her personal tablet and began sketching. "You said these devourers consume energy and adapt to new threats. But what if we don't give them energy to consume? What if instead of sophisticated weapons, we use the most primitive destructive force in the universe?" She turned the tablet around, showing her rough diagram. The aliens stared at it for a long moment. "This is ... Krill began. "Insane," Zexhai finished. "Completely," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "Want to see how insane we can get?" The Galactic Council's emergency session had been going on for 3 standard cycles now, and Ambassador Zexhai was beginning to lose what little hope remained in his crystalline heart. The holographic displays around the circular chamber showed the same devastating images over and over entire. Star systems going dark, billions of souls vanishing into the void as the Devourers consumed everything in their path. "The Altarian fleet has been completely destroyed," announced High Counselor Vorth, his tentacles writhing in distress. "That's the 7th major naval force we've lost in 2 cycles. The Devourers are adapting faster than we anticipated." Zexhai watched as the other representatives shifted uncomfortably in their environmental suits. The Kaleri delegation's feathers had turned a sickly yellow color, while the silicon-based morphids had dimmed their usual bright glow to barely visible levels. Fear was a universal language, it seemed. "What about the Nexus Coalition's quantum weapons?" asked Representative Krill, her voice crackling through the universal translator. "Surely their reality-warping technology could—" "Gone," Vorth interrupted flatly. "The Nexus worlds fell yesterday. The Devourers consumed not just the matter, but the very fabric of space-time itself. Our quantum weapons simply fed them more energy." The chamber fell into stunned silence. The Nexus Coalition had been their greatest hope, a collection of species, so advanced they could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. If they had fallen, what chance did anyone else have? Zexhia's species, the Veltar, had always prided themselves on their analytical minds. They could process thousands of variables simultaneously, finding patterns where others saw only chaos. But as he ran the calculations again and again, every scenario ended the same way: total galactic extinction within 50 cycles. "There must be something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some species we haven't contacted, some technology we haven't considered." A bitter laugh echoed through the chamber. It came from Counselor Thane of the Broken Worlds, one of the few survivors from the Outer Rim territories where the Devourer invasion had begun. "You want to know what I've learned after watching 1,000 worlds die?" Thane's scarred face twisted into a grim smile. "The universe doesn't care about our pride, our technology, or our civilization. Those things out there? They don't negotiate, they don't hesitate, and they sure as hell don't show mercy. Then what do you suggest?" Vorth's voice carried a note of desperation. "Should we simply give up? Let them consume everything we've built?" Thane was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display showing the Devourer's inexorable advance. "There is one species we haven't asked." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Every major spacefaring civilization was represented in the Galactic Council. Who could they have possibly overlooked? The humans, Thane continued, and the murmurs died instantly. Zexhai felt his crystalline structure vibrate with something between disbelief and horror. You can't be serious. The Deathworld primitives? They barely have faster-than-light travel. Exactly, Thane said. Think about it. Every advanced species we've thrown at the Devourers has been consumed. Our sophisticated energy weapons feed them. Our quantum technology makes them stronger. Our telepathic attacks are like background radiation. Representative Krill's mandibles clicked nervously. But humans are barely a Type 1 civilization. They still use chemical propulsion for most of their space travel. Their weapons are crude kinetic systems and primitive nuclear devices. And they come from a world that tried to kill them every single day for millions of years, Thane countered. Do you know what the human homeworld is like? 93% of species that encounter Earth's environment die within one planetary rotation. The gravity alone would crush most of us? And that's before considering the toxic atmosphere, the extreme weather patterns, or the fact that nearly every life form on the planet is designed to kill something else. Zexhai accessed his species' extensive database on classified worlds. Earth's file made for disturbing reading. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would oxidize most organic compounds. Gravitational force nearly 3 times galactic standard. Weather systems capable of generating energy equivalent to hundreds of fusion bombs. And the life forms? Their apex predators hunt in coordinated groups, he read aloud, his voice growing quieter with each fact. Their prey species have developed armor, toxins, and explosive speed as survival mechanisms. Even their plant life is often carnivorous or poisonous. And somehow, Thane said, the humans not only survived, but thrived. They turned every challenge into an advantage, every predator into a lesson. When faced with stronger creatures, they built tools. When faced with hostile environments, they adapted. When faced with impossible odds, they found ways to win anyway. High Counselor Vorth's tentacles had stopped writhing. You're suggesting we ask a primitive species to solve a problem that has defeated the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy? Suggesting we ask a species that has never had the luxury of surrender. Thane replied, every other race in this chamber evolved on worlds that were, comparatively speaking, paradise. We developed technology to make our lives easier, more comfortable. Humans developed technology to survive another day. Zexhai found himself accessing more files on human history. What he found defied logical explanation. They had fought wars using primitive projectile weapons that could penetrate advanced armor. They had survived apocalyptic events that would have ended most civilizations. They had looked at impossible challenges and responded with something their files called spite. Look at their military doctrine, Thane continued, warming to his subject. When the Zorthi Empire tried to establish a protective outpost in their system, what did the humans do? They built ships out of asteroid materials, strapped nuclear weapons to them, and launched kamikaze attacks until the Zorthi withdrew. When the Merchant Guild tried to regulate their trade routes, humans started using black market junk drives that had a 30% chance of killing everyone aboard. That's insane, whispered Representative Krill. That's human, Thane corrected. They don't think like us. Where we see insurmountable obstacles, they see engineering problems. Where we see certain death, they see acceptable risk. Where we calculate odds and retreat when they're unfavorable, humans calculate odds and then figure out how to cheat. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed muted as the representatives contemplated this radical proposal. Finally, High Counselor Vorth spoke. And you believe these Deathworlders ... could succeed where our greatest minds have failed? Thane's smile held no humor whatsoever. Counselor, our greatest minds built weapons that feed our enemy. Our most advanced civilizations fell in cycles. Maybe it's time we stopped thinking like civilized beings and started thinking like survivors? The vote was closer than anyone expected.